Minato Namikaze is one of the strongest and most iconic characters in the history of Naruto. From his invention of the legendary rasengan to his absolute mastery over the space-time ninjutsu known as FTG, Minato has struck fear and awe in shinobi for generations. But what would happen if Minato was a bad guy? How would he fare against those who stand atop the shinobi world in Naruto Shippuden? That is exactly what we'll be digging into in this video. In other words, today we'll be exploring and breaking down Jonin Minato versus the 5 Kage Summit. But before we begin diving into these individual matchups, I think it's first of all important to discuss two things. Number one, the fact that I'm not doing this by myself, and number two, the exact structure of this video and who he's going to be facing off against, etc, etc. So without any further ado, today I have a very special guest who's going to go over all of that. Virtue, go ahead and say what's up, brother.
Hey, how's it going? It's Virtue. Everyone, I've been on Sage's channel before. He's been on mine before. You guys should know us. Sub to me, sub to him. You guys know what's up. So basically, we have Jonin Minato running the 5 Kage Summit, and he will not have the aid of Taka or Zetsu. So Zetsu will not heal him during the Mei fight, and he will not have the full Taka advantage through the fight against the Raikage. But here's basically the structure of how he will run the gauntlet. It will begin with the Raikage plus C and Darui, then Gaara plus Kankuro and Tamari, and Darui if he's still alive or conscious by that point. Then he moves on to Mei and Chojuro when Mei tries to seal the fight into a hallway and Onoki and Akatsuchi stand by. After either winning or losing against Mei, we will then have him move to Onoki, and then after beating or losing to Onoki, he will then chase Danzo, fight Fu and Torne, and then fight Danzo following that, in the same order that Sasuke initially did.
I think that we've pretty much laid the groundwork for it, aside from one final point, which is he's going to be actually trying, but he's going to be in character. So he is willing to, kill these dudes, but we're assuming that he's a bad guy, he's going after Danzo, blah blah blah, so that way we can get him into a similar mindset as to the one that Sasuke had at this point in time. So for the first matchup, I think this is going to be the one that might be the most contentious. We have Minato versus A, C, and Darui. Now, Virtue and I talked about this earlier, and we think, we're on the same page here. We think that, A is probably going to take the lead here and try to fight Minato 1v1 with C and Darui as support. Now, C is a non-combatant type, and Virtue can go into that in just a second, and Darui is going to be pretty strong support, but, maybe not anything too crazy. And we can go into where Minato scales in regards to these two, but do you want to kind of talk about C and Darui here really quick?
So I guess we can begin with C. C is non-combative, as you kind of hinted at earlier. Many people don't really know this. While yes, he is strong, he is kind of guarding the Raikage when the Raikage is going to be standing amongst the most powerful shinobi in the world. So yes, C obviously isn't awful. But you could even use his, fighting style. He mainly relies on sensory and genjutsu, supporting Darui and A being the main fighters. This is supported by how Darui literally tells him, hey bro, we don't need you here. Basically me and the Raikage will fight it. You go look for Sasuke's companions because he has sensory. So this is pretty important. He's also not in a combative unit and the war is in a sensory unit. So yes, things like the flash pull and everything are great, but Sasuke's 3 Tomoe breaks out of it. And Minato may have some genjutsu resistance, which we can talk about a little bit later. But for Darui, yeah, I would actually say Darui is quite strong. The way you could always talk about Darui is okay, so he was trained by the 3rd Raikage, the strongest Raikage or whatever, right? And he even has the Black Lightning, which is a tattoo that's basically so formidable that Kinkaku and Ginkaku, the greatest, criminals in Kumo history are yeah, this guy, he's gonna give us a good fight. Look at it, look at it. And they're looking at the tattoo and stuff. And he has the Black Lightning because that's obviously what the tattoo means, which it's kind of a shame is only ever used on White Zetsu. But here in the Summit, he obviously still has the tattoo, so he can still use the ability. He can still combo attack with V1A, which is consistent with the Kinkaku encounter, considering the Raikage thought he needed to go down there himself. But Darui beat him up, so, it's kind of yeah, Darui's a V1A level fighter, or at least a V1A level fighter prior to A getting more of a mental amp at the end of 461, where he gets a little more serious and his eyes get bloodshot and stuff, where he starts to kind of up the V1 cloak. So basically you could say that Darui is one of the stronger Jonin, right? He's able to clash with Suigetsu, and Suigetsu's under Killer Bee. So Darwee's, still under Killer Bee, still under the Raikage, but other than that, he's like one of the stronger Jonin and Kumo, and that means that basically he'd be below like Shippuden Kakashi, right? Because, Kakashi, even in part 1, is stated to be the strongest, Jonin, and Konoha stated in both the first data book and the first fan book. And this would imply that since Konoha is the strongest nation, it would also be above Darui. So, it's like Kakashi level and stuff, and Minato is probably just above that as a Jonin, which you can get into as well. And we could also, if you want, I could touch back on, like, how Minato, I think he'd start the fight against the Raikage.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, the important thing here is that it's basically going to be a 1v1 with somewhat strong support from Darui. And then whenever you look at the fact that he has a sizable advantage in terms of scaling, which I'll talk about, it kind of gets pretty bad for Team A. So this is where I'm going to introduce the scaling that I talked about in my previous Minato video, where Jonin Minato is actually kind of cracked in comparison to, what a lot of people think. So Jonin Minato is just outright stated in the 543 chapter synopsis statement to be above A, to have surpassed A. Now A, this is important because A is not a name, it is a title given to each of the first 4 Raikage whenever they become the strongest person in the cloud. This is confirmed in the data books, no way around it. Some people will try to argue that because it says Raikage A is the title given, that it's only when they become Raikage, but it's worth noting that during the encounter with A and B during the Third Shinobi War, A is already stated to have been in contention for the role of Raikage, so this means that he is undoubtedly the strongest, or relative to the strongest person in the village. This is important because we actually see him being called A while the third Raikage is still alive. The third Raikage is a combatant who was able to go toe-to-toe with the full power Eight Tails and win, even tanking a Bijou bomb. And the only way that he ever went down is by accidentally harming himself. So we have Minato over a guy who is over to or equal to a guy who's over the full power Eight Tails. This is important because the full power Eight Tails is actually stated to be B's strongest combat form, enhancing not only his chakra, his speed, his strength, but also his senses, which is why he's able to block something like the Amaterasu. So this is by far his strongest form, putting it automatically above B's V1 state, which is relative to KCM1 Naruto. So whatever the gap you think is between between V1B and full power Gyuki, that is the minimum gap from, Minato to that level as well, right? So Minato is that high above somebody who's a KCM1 level combatant, and we all know that A is somewhat relative to KCM1 Naruto. Now, I would argue that V2A is probably a little bit above KCM1 Naruto, but, it's close enough to where you can make an argument. So for me, I just think that the scaling advantage that he has, plus the attack potency that he has that should be able to just rip right through anything that he has in terms of, like, his Rasengan and stuff, just gives him a massive advantage. And one final thing to point out is a lot of people point to his interaction with A and B in the Third War and try to use it as an anti-feat, but there are a few different things here that are really important. I think the most important thing, though, is he doesn't use his Rasengan. So this is a guy who has mastered the Rasengan. It's easily his strongest attack, and instead of using his most powerful attack against A, who has a lightning cloak on, he uses a kunai. So just think about that really quick. This guy who has, like, basically a mini-tailed beast bomb that he can charge up instantaneously, instead of using that, he uses a kunai against a guy with a lightning cloak. So there's a very clear indication that he's holding back here, and he still just dog walks both of them at the same time. And we get statements in the data books that talk about how he crossed blades with both of them multiple times, like as a duo, and he never lost. So it's consistent for him to be above them. It's not very consistent to say that he scales to that level when we already have him scaling above the likes of Yuki. So I think that kind of just seals the deal for me in terms of, like, where he should be in comparison to A. He should just be faster, stronger, have better AP, all that good stuff. Do you have anything else to add here in terms of, like, stylistically how you think this goes?
Yeah. I mean, I guess also something to kind of support what you were saying about, like, the higher, later, A or whatever in the war and KCM1, right, is it's a pretty intricate idea to kind of support it, and it would just kind of stem from how Kishimoto actually draws both A in his near like full speed lightning cloak in KCM1 Naruto, where like even in like the flashback against Jonin Minato 2, they're basically invisible when they run or dash. Like there's only streams of either light or lightning respectively, and it kind of just implies that they're of a relative caliber, those two, so it could kind of imply something similar for Jonin Minato. And we can kind of just mainly derive like how his fighting style would be entering the summit, seeing as Minato's command ability that he fostered in battle was utilized in real time whilst Hokage, implying that combative strategies would have been similar, and Minato has basically, two ways he begins his battles. Minato's initiative to begin his fights via a full blitz utilizing body flicker is nearly always, such as how he does it against the Iwa Nin to save Kakashi, he does it against Obito. B implies that it's a common strategy to do with how the yellow flash is first at bat quite a smash, just like, the yellow flash or whatever, right? And the other beginning strategy would be his like kunai throw, which is shown where he like relocates to the battle against Obito to a field of kunai. He throws kunai off start against A and B in the 542 encounter. He likely does it in Kakashi Gaiden against the 50 shinobi. He does it like 70 times actually. And he's also just like standing in a field of kunai when B notes, like Minato creating the rasengan. He also has the, the flash howl dance, which is literally like something he uses to make an opening against Jubito, which is like essentially him creating like, a clone to throw out 6 kunai, giving him variable options as to like when and where he could actually teleport. And so yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. He has a lot of different ways to get around A's kind of style of brute force and wrestling. Like the second fan book, Kishimoto spends a lot of time kind of dedicating it to A's style, right? And he talks about why he might not be so proficient in hand-to-hand combat, but is probably very dominant in things like pro wrestling style. Like he has like a gold championship belt and stuff, which is pretty like consistent how he uses the Liger Bomb, which this is really weird because Minato has the violently rotating Rasengan, which is just like pure chakra and force and whatnot. So basically the lightning cloak might just bust apart from that. And the reason why I say this is it actually does respond to force. So when hit with something with high energy, such as the Chidori, both are lightning, but it's kind of weird because the cloak spazzes out and Sasuke's Chidori gets weirdly enlarged. Like it's larger than basically his entire body. It's gigantic. So you can almost say it fused through it because it was like lightning. And like whenever A used like the Liger Bomb, the cloak also spazzes out in like all different directions. So potentially like when Minato hits him with the Rasengan, the cloak might just spaz out. If it's not in like a peak form, it could just dissipate. And that's to say it wouldn't go straight through it entirely based on its showings against like, Kurama's Bijou Bomb when Minato's only 15,
Yep.
And like Orochimaru kind of implies that like a much, much smaller one would just vaporize him, seeing as he literally just connected his organs back together. And he's like, nah, chakra's so dense would it even kill me, which is just pretty telling. So I think he definitely gets around it. I think whatever support Darui offers, A either wouldn't really want to accept it because he wants to fight Minato. It's kind of just how he is. And it's like, okay, what's Darui actually going to do though? You know what I mean? Like we already established like his full speed. So I don't really think there's anything. I think Gaara kind of has to come in and save him.
Yeah. And I mean, just to touch on the Rasengan stuff too, like Naruto's Sage Mode Rasengan is able to, break through the third Raikage's lightning cloak. And like you can talk about the Edos being nerfed and stuff, but they are referenced as being brought back near their peak power. So he would have to be like at least somewhere near his peak power, and he was able to tank a Bijou Bomb, and Sage Mode Naruto's Rasengan is able to damage him through the cloak. And this is important because Sage Mode Naruto in the mental scape fighting a half power Kurama it took like 30 Rasengans for him to just like push him back, and it didn't even do significant damage. Whereas one incomplete Rasengan from a heavily fatigued Minato who just mastered the jutsu that day after using it like 9 times in training was able to at least match a partial Bijou Bomb from a full Kurama. So it's like his Rasengan feats are just like way more impressive than this Naruto. So if that Sage Mode Naruto clone can like break through the cloak from somebody who arguably has stronger lightning defense, I would say it's very likely that Minato's Rasengan should just rip right through it and just one-shot him. And then obviously like Darui and C can't do anything to him. So yeah, I think he moves on from there, and Gaara has to intervene. Now, if Gaara intervenes like he did against the Amaterasu and like slides his sand in between to try to stop the Rasengan, I don't think it would work. I think it gets blasted through, and he just like takes down A still, or he just like it just gets beat. You know, like he just like outspeeds the sand. Like I don't see any reason why Gaara's sand would be anywhere near Jonin Minato's combat speed. So then we have him facing down against Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari, the Sand siblings. I mean, what do they have to suggest that they're above KCM1 Naruto or on like the Eight Tails level? Like nothing. Like do you wanna talk about this for a second?
I mean, yeah, bro. Like Temari and Kankuro. Okay, all you get is the last guidebook. Kind of states in reference to her casting that she has potentially the best wind style in all of Sunar. She's the best wind style user. But it's like, okay, that could put it above Gaara's sand. But we also don't know, because yeah, it's never specified, but that's exactly the problem with the argument, is it's never specified whether it's earth or wind. We just have no idea. So, okay, what does Kankuro have? Well, he actually has something pretty nice. It's in the second fan book, and it states that he is the best puppet user, but, let's think of some other puppets, users to compare him to. Let me think off my chinny chin chin. Chio's dead, Sorcery's dead. Okay, yeah, there actually is nobody.
Yeah.
So, he basically sucks, and he's going to get beat up as well. All Gaara has is like, okay, yeah, you can intercept the V2 Raikage's leg drop, and it's like, it was probably a lot slower seeing as Sasuke can react to it like 2 different times while he's falling, compared to like he just had to turn his head and just like defend himself from the lateral bolt of pain and all the other V2 attacks. Like he's dodging Amaterasu, so he's clearly reacting much better at the leg drop, and we don't know where the sand comes from or anything like that at all. So it's like, okay, he kind of reacts like the wisps from Amaterasu, which is like cool, but it's not him fully blitzing Amaterasu like A is. He's kind of just putting them out for pressure. He's not actually fully forming them or anything like that. That's kind of how it's displayed as well. It'd be really weird if like the Raikage was just slower than Gaara, and that's also just never implied either. So I think it's like, okay, Minato could blitz around him to the point where he can get around the sand, because like Gaara, his style with his sand, we literally saw how speed is what bypasses it. Like, for example, when Lee takes his weights off and he's kind of kicking him around, he eventually gets that heel kick on his cheek to cut his, cheek open, right? Minato basically does the same thing, except, well, he cuts his head off. Yeah. So you guys can kind of see where this is going. I don't think there's too much substance for Gaara or this team. Even if they use that combo attack, it's like, yeah, it's like it can move like close to like what Laser Circus can, but like Laser Circus is blitzing Kinkaku. Oh, okay. So it's really not that crazy. Minato also just has to be able to think to teleport away from it. So it's like, okay, is it faster than Minato's nerve transmission speed, which is faster than Raikage? Probably not. So yeah, I really don't think there's too much here. Do you want to touch back on that, or?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. Like Minato in the third war is stated in the data books to have literally gone like platoon to platoon, wiping out entire swaths of shinobi by himself in order to give the edge to Konoha whenever they were like at a disadvantage. And then whenever he shows up in the iconic scene where like he has them throw the kunai at the 50 stone shinobi or whatever, he's already scuffed up, and then he gives them 70 kunai. Like you can see 70 kunai on panel. He's like, just direct these at the enemies all at once. And he takes them all out. So it's like he potentially used FTG 30, 50, 70 times in like a blink of an eye, as the guy sort of refers to. This is a jutsu that like requires 3 Jonin level combatants to use because it's so chakra taxing and difficult. So like this is something that he can just like do anytime. And he also like he kind of let them participate, but he didn't have to. We literally see he reaches in his back pocket whenever he's facing off against A and B, and there are 6 kunai back there, and whenever he throws them out, it's 28. So it's like he's clearly using the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu, so he could just reach back, grab a couple kunai, throw them all out. He's got like 30 kunai on the battlefield right off rip. So whenever Gaara, Tamari, and Kankuro show up, they're already at a disadvantage. So yeah, I don't really think there's much else to talk about here. I think he moves on to where the Hokage, or where the Gokage chambers are at, and faces off against Mei and Chojuro. You want to talk about why Chojuro doesn't matter here?
Yeah. So Chojuro in the fourth data book is basically applied to have like his confidence linked to his actual power. And this is why he was scared to fight Sasuke, because Sasuke once beat Zabuza. Yeah, so Minato, who has a run-on-site order from countries alone, and the 10-year anniversary guide also states that he was feared by all nations because of his time in the Third War with his usage of, the flying, Thunder God, which is also corroborated in the second data book as well. Yeah, I think Chojuro is going to be very scared. And it's like, what does Chojuro do? Well, he hits Sasuke through a wall, and yeah, it's like, okay, Mei does something similar, and I suppose we can move over there, because there's not much to talk about with Chojuro. And it's like, okay, they could put a lot of pressure on Sasuke, and argue almost more pressure, or just as much pressure as the Raikage did. But here's the problem. Sasuke was pummeled by the Raikage, and is now much more fatigued. The second he tries to up his Susanoo form to anything above just the ribcage, he drops to his knees, and Karin mentions how she knows that his chakra is weakening, and we know that his chakra is directly correlated to his power, seeing as every time his chakra gets colder and more powerful, he also gets an ocular amp. So it's clearly tied, except here he's getting weaker, he's dropping down and everything. He can't even move. And it's like, okay, what's he do right before that? Well, the initial lava style attack, which is obviously going to be faster and greater than Chojuro, because she's obviously the Mizukage, and Sasuke is able to dodge it with his 3 Tomoe from behind the back. He's still somewhat fatigued, by the way. So it's like, okay, yes, Mei does have some high ends, and she's pretty impressive, but it's only impressive because Sasuke is so, fatigued and stuff. And it's like, I will give you, she's probably more impressive than Mifune, because, okay, the Zetsu that come up to steal the chakra, they can hold and restrain Mifune and his 2 samurai guards, but Mei, as soon as they grab her, she just melts their faces off. So it could imply that she's of a greater threat than Mifune, but it's like, okay, well, Mifune also sucks, so it doesn't really matter. And again, it's like, okay, she's greater than Mifune, which is again like a 3 Tomoe Sasuke level threat or below that, so it's like, it's probably not like an MS Sasuke level threat. And Jonin Minato is obviously going to be above them. Like all the lava style he could also just teleport away from, which is why it's just such a nasty combo, seeing as this is a new room. Hence he would also just do the strategies that we were talking about earlier with him just throwing multiple kunai everywhere, so he still has those options, and he could also just flash howl dance at Chojuro and Mei, because Mei tries to seal it off in the hallway. So if Chojuro's with her, it's going to be even worse. So he just, summons a clone, 6 kunai out, basically whatever way Mei moves, it's done. He has 6 different angles to hit from. Wait, chill, pause. But it's pretty bad, yeah. You want to touch on Mei and what she might be able to do?
Yeah, I mean, so I do think Mei gets dunked on a lot in these videos, because
for sure,
who she gets put up against is bad. She is super strong. It's just Jonin Minato again is significantly above somebody who is above the 8 tails, and I just don't see any reason to believe that she's quite on that tier. I mean, she does have some really impressive stuff, and especially her Kekkei Genkai, but again, if he's in character, he's trying to get to Danzo, he's probably just going to body flicker and cut her head off. And if he doesn't do that, as soon as she seals off the room, I mean, kunai are going all over the place. Chojuro better hope he wore his brown pants, and Mei is just getting dog walked. So I don't think that this is much of an issue. He honestly may be able to just avoid them, because even if they try to cut him off in the room, he's going to be like, oh, these guys are in here. And he might just body flicker blitz them off rip and kill both of them.
His goal isn't to beat the Kage, it's to get Danzo. So, there's some validity in him just teleporting away.
Yeah, he'd be like, why am I going to deal with this lady? So it's at this point, he's going to have already fought basically 2 full squads of like Jonin to Kage level combatants. And it's like, why would he waste his time here again? But you could just argue again that he just wipes them out really quickly and then moves on to the next room. And in the next room, you know, Danzo will have already fled, right? Like Danzo is already like, dude, I'm getting out of here, bro. And so he's going to have to go through Onoki and Akatsuchi. Onoki is probably the toughest person he will have fought so far because that particle style is crazy. If we give him that Will of Stone amp, like he is, you know, able to react to the likes of like lightened V2A. But the problem is his whole arsenal is countered by FTG. Like there's just not anything he can really do here. And Akatsuchi does have some pretty cool showings, but like he's not going to punch Minato. That's not happening. You want to talk about this matchup?
Yeah, it's like, okay, Akatsuchi, yeah, and like in the war, like I think it's like chapter like 514, so it's pretty early war. He's able to react to Datara's like explosive velocities, which does scale above like heavy Sasuke, but let's be honest, Minato puts him on a leash and it's not really that funny. And also, let us know if you want to see Sasuke versus Minato form by form on Sage's channel. I'll be back too for it. But you know, let us know. Anyway, besides the point. So back to Onoki, yeah, I agree with Sage, totally. Onoki is really the worst threat to possibly face in the summit, and this goes for basically anybody you put in a 5 Kage Summit matchup. The molecular destruction in the particle style is totally nuts. It's totally nuts, and it's probably one of the hardest things to actually face. If you use some Boruto anime stuff, you might just be able to say that he might not even have like FTG. He might just be able to put jutsu into it, like because in the Boruto anime they kind of just fire jutsu into the particle style before it fully like you know, disintegrates whatever, and it kind of just explodes or detonates. So you could also say something similar because Minato has several different nature, you know, releases and stuff that he could utilize that we just don't really see that often. So he might be able to utilize more of his jutsu capabilities, things like that, and whatnot. So I definitely think there's a lot of options, but I think it's like, okay, even if he gets encapsulated in the big, you know, particle style square or whatever, he's just going to teleport out, you know what I mean? He's able to outspeed Obito's Kamwis and stuff like that, and of course that's later, but it's still pretty telling just to say that, like, he's probably going to be able to do it. And if anything, Onoki really only tried to kill Sasuke on the basis that everyone else failed, and they all want him dead, so he's going to try. And with one attack, he gets closer than everybody else in the summit. So put that in perspective, you know. Put some respect on Onoki. But it's still pretty telling, okay? Because what if Minato just escapes? It's not like Onoki's going to try to chase him. Because, again, he doesn't really care. So I usually go with the interpretation that I think Minato would try to just run out and get to Danzo as fast as possible. Because he knows he darted out of the room. Because as soon as he enters, Danzo darts. So it's like, I think he's just going to try to circumvent Onoki, and he's going to be able to do that very fast via his style of fighting, throwing kunai, teleporting, body flickering, off start, things like that, things of that nature. You know, he body flickers off start against, you know, the Iwa Nin to save Kakashi. He does it off start against Obito. He does it literally all the time. B implies he does it, you know, first at bat, quite a smash, just like the Yellow Flash in KCM1 Naruto does it. So it's clearly a common strategy for him to do. So I think he could always just blitz around him and then leave. If anything, he might be able to blitz around him, get behind him, slice his neck, because again, it's still kind of implied that he gets the Will of Stone amp, or whatever you want to say. His will at least gets renewed, and he gets stronger in the war, so we don't really know what this one can do. But again, even if you equate them to be the same, I would still give Minato a slight edge, just based on more concrete showings or whatnot. But yeah, I'd say he probably just exit out of the room.
Yeah, well, also keep in mind, Onoki is the same guy who put the flee on site order on Minato. So like he might just be like, you know what, I don't want these problems. You know what I mean? Like he was like, literally, if you see this guy, run away. So I think, you know, Onoki, while he is really strong, if he does face off against Minato, he's just outmatched. Like Minato will throw a kunai at him, like directly at his head, he'll dodge it, and then he'll teleport behind him and just like karate chop him in the back, and he's incapacitated. So yeah, I do think there's a real possibility that, like Virtue said, he just circumvents him and goes directly after Danzo. But regardless, he's just getting past these guys with no difficulty at all. They're not fast enough to stop him. I mean, again, you know, somebody who scales above the 8 tails, which inherently puts him above, you know, somebody like A. And also, here's another thing that I think is really, really important. His ability to throw those kunai is really underrated, because in the fight against A and B, whenever A like runs at him and he's like 2 inches from his face with his fist. Minato's his hand is at his side with the kunai in it, and before A is able to actually touch him, he's able to throw that kunai all the way up to that tree and teleport to it. And then before he can realize like what had fully happened, like all he can think is like, oh my gosh, he dodged my fastest punch. Minato then throws the kunai again before A has a chance to change position and lands on his back ready to strike him with the kunai. So he blitzes him twice with FTG kunai throws, not even just the FTG itself. You can literally see it says sprung on the panel where like the kunai is landing on the tree. So the fact is, he is so much faster in that interaction than somebody who should scale 2 or above the 8 tails, that like it just gets him to ridiculous levels already. So I think he gets past that pretty easily. There's no way Onoki is reacting to that speed. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say, I was like, could you imagine? He's like, he won't be like, Akatsuchi, get him, go get him, because he's like putting run on sight orders, which would include people like Kitsuchi, who's like, Earth Styles able to somewhat stalemate the Ghetto Maso. You know what I mean? Like one of the strongest Iwa Jonin. He's not gonna be like, Kitsuchi, get his ass. You know, like he really doesn't care.
Yeah. And for perspective too, like Kako, the guy who Kid Kakashi, who just got the Sharingan like 2 panels, is described as an extremely powerful Jonin. And so it's like, if you apply that just to Iwa standards and you say like it's still below like Konoha or whatever, like he's one of the stronger ones there. And the fact that Kid Kakashi, who is able to just body bag like the strongest Jonin in their village, like one of the strongest, is just super telling. So Minato is having no issue here, and he moves on to face Danzo. Now, I think for the sake of consistency here, I do want him to make it out to the bridge, because otherwise it's like, oh, they're fighting in some ambiguous hallway, whatever. So he makes it out there to him, and now Danzo, let's just say he already had, like, Fu and Torone have come with him. How do you think this matchup goes down? Like, how do you think it starts off, and where do you think it goes?
I think it goes about the same. I think we're going to say that he's going to be able to catch Danzo just as quick or faster than what Sasuke did, which means Danzo's arm, or at least the golden, metal seal, whatever joint thing he's got, is probably still on. So he's going to have to take that off. And I've heard some people say that, like, okay, even if Minato just blitzes Fu and Torone or whatever, it would just be that, like, he could still use Izanagi, right? Because Obito can. But that's kind of not the case. And it's because of that exact reason. Obito can use Izanagi with the eye covered just fine. Yet Danzo seems to have to take this off, which would probably just imply that it's suppressing the chakra so it doesn't drain him constantly, because look what it did to Kakashi, so I could see why. So this is probably why he has to take it off. So yeah, he will actually have to fight Fu and Tornate, while Danzo hopefully could, take this off in like the minute or whatever, right? So Fu and Tornate, right, I'm kind of an apologist for them. They're pretty solid, they're pretty cool. They're able to press Obito, they're able to, throw kunai faster than Obito can punch and stuff. They're able to decipher Kamui faster, or at a younger age than basically anybody ever in the entire series. They're not even 20 whenever they do it. They're basically the 2 guys that Danzo was like, I'm gonna go do some real sketchy stuff on the most powerful shinobi in the world. These 2 guys are gonna protect me. Like, these guys are replacements for Orochimaru and Suguru, which is pretty telling if you go off that the old Kabuto encounter, like when he has the flashback and stuff. So these 2 I think are pretty telling. Except the problem is it's like, okay, how do they deal with him? What can mind transfer catch Minato? No, FTG. Okay, can Tornate like touch him, get some bugs on him? No, probably not. That just doesn't seem like a case that's going to happen, seeing as it only happened on Obito, because Obito doesn't use ninjutsu or anything like that. He doesn't use those strike attacks. He actually has to pull them in, and so he comes up behind him and grabs him. So of course, yeah, he gets touched and he has to, drop his arm off or whatever. But even if Minato does, he gets his arm ripped off, he can still fight. Minato still fights very proficiently with no arms in the war. This isn't something out of, just insane to happen or anything like that. Not that I think he would lose an arm, so I think he would beat those 2 up pretty quickly, just with like kunai, body flicker strategies, basic things like that, rasengans to the full-on face and stuff, to where I think he goes on to fight Danzo. And there I think it's like, if you want to touch on Danzo, you want to talk about
Yeah, yeah. So a couple things here. First of all, what we could say is, Danzo's like, go take care of it, guys, and they charge at Minato, and Danzo still has his eye covered. And so he has no Sharingan perception yet. So Minato legitimately could just like, look at the flick of the wrist, and like throw a kunai at him and just teleport to it and kill him right there without ever having to deal with Fu and Torine. Because that kunai throw, unironically, like double blitzing A, is ridiculous. So I see no reason why like he wouldn't be able to just like be like, okay, these guys suck. I'm just gonna throw this kunai right past them and cut this guy's head off. But if we assume he does end up fighting Fu and Torine, and then he fights against Danzo while he takes off the seal or whatever, and he's able to use Izanagi. I mean, this is a much better situation for Danzo than that, but like, what is he gonna do? Like, he's just gonna get killed over and over again. And I know a lot of people, like, whenever they talk about Danzo here, they kind of give him this weird benefit of the doubt of like, oh, well, if they don't have like insane sensory capabilities, then they're not gonna be able to know that he's like using Izanagi, teleporting behind them and like getting ready to kill them. Well, number one, Minato has displayed sensory. He does a similar feat to what Tobirama does when detecting the Kinkaku force, where in Kakashi Gaiden he like puts his finger on the ground, detects like 20 shinobi or whatever.
And in the war. He does it in the war too. They both sense Naruto, yeah.
Yeah, so he has sensory capabilities even as a Jonin. So you could just argue that he like senses Danzo popping up behind him after the Izanagi, but also like Danzo's kind of an idiot because he like announces himself. Like he like teleports or like appears behind Sasuke and is like, how about we battle with our eyes? It's like, dude, if you wanted to kill him there, you could have just cut his head off. Like he could have just ended it right there, but he didn't. So one way or the other, Minato is gonna know that like this guy's popping up behind him, and then Minato, being one of the smartest characters in the series, is gonna figure out what's going on. I mean, if Karin could figure it out, I see no reason why this absolute like generational talent genius wouldn't be able to. So like once he figures out what's going on, he's probably gonna like try to cut his arm off. If he realizes that doesn't work, he's just gonna continue to blitz and take him out until the timer's up.
Yeah, I mean, bro, I see no reason why. Like, it is really stupid that Danzo's like,
yeah,
hell, let's battle with our eyes. And Sasuke full on turns around. He notices him, like, he turns his head first, looks at him, turns his whole body to where the rib cage then breaks the kunai. So it's like, okay, can Danzo somehow getting behind Minato be so fast that Minato can't even think? No, probably not. Because after this happens 2 times, 3 times, he's going to just be expecting it, right? Even like Karin, she notices how the eyes close. Minato is obviously more observant and is very good at looking at Sharingan, by the way. The dude stares at Obito their entire fight. It is perfectly fine. And this is something that like could imply that like even if, because I've heard the idea that Danzo can use like Sharingan Genjutsu to like catch him off guard. He just didn't do it against Sasuke because Sasuke has a Mangekyo. For one, it's like, prove that idea, right? But secondly, it's like, okay, Minato might even have resistance too. And the idea is basically because Obito has so many times during the entire fight where he could Genjutsu Minato. And a lot of people bring up when they're running at each other, which yes, that's very good. But even like when Minato's standing on his statue, staring at Kurama, and he's like, you noticed me. Obito's down on the street looking up at him. Like he's literally just staring at him with his 3-tone way out. We see it in the flashback. So it's pretty crazy. Like, Minato might just have, resistance if you do take that Genjutsu route, which personally I don't. I don't think there's any finding, just there's any basis really for that, especially the ones on his arms. Like, I don't see him like Genjutsu people with those, but yeah, I just think that Minato would be able to basically blitz around him and kill him for 10 minutes straight, and I don't see any reason why Danzo would be able to get anything off. Danzo had to die 4 times to get 1 attack off that Sasuke tanked, so yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's nothing to suggest that Minato couldn't kill him. There's nothing to suggest that Minato wouldn't be able to sense him. And even if he can't, Danzo will announce himself. And then we know, like, Kurama tells Minato to tap into his sensory mode. So it's like, even if you want to say he doesn't have passive sensory, which I think he does, like, he senses Obito behind him during the Nine Tails attack. He's able to sense Naruto's chakra, without any indication that he's tapping into a specific mode. But like, even if you want to say he has to tap into a specific sensory mode, after Danzo announces himself like an idiot and then gets countered, Minato's gonna be like, something's going on, I gotta keep this sensory on just to like make sure that we're good. And then after, you know, 2 or 3 times of that, he definitely figures out how Izanagi is working. And from there, it's just like a matter of time. Now, a lot of people point to Kodo here. I don't think that it matters. Number one, because in my opinion, I think instead of facing Danzo like that, like what we're talking about, it's far more likely that he just like throws a kunai behind Fu and Torone, teleports to it, and cuts Danzo's head off before he can even release the Sharingan seal. And also, here's something that people don't talk about. We know that dojutsu can be sealed because, number one, we actually see Danzo using that gauntlet seal thing in that fight. And then number two, we see Ao talk about how he has a patch over his Byakugan that like can seal it away if like somebody tries to take his eye, right? So there's a very real possibility that Minato might be able to use something like a tetragram or a 4-prong seal in order to seal away the power of the Sharingan. So, you know, at some point in time, he literally might be able to just stop Danzo from using Izanagi. Like, that's a very real possibility. I think it's pretty clear. Minato clears pretty easily. We do want to do a Sasuke versus Minato form by form video, so at some point that's going to happen. If you guys do want that soon, let me know. I've got a full slate of stuff planned, but we can obviously move that up if that's something you guys are interested in. But yeah, that's the video.
It'll have me, guys. That's why you guys want it. It'll have me, so make sure you guys comment about it. Nah, I'm kidding. Subscribe to Sage, sub to me. My content's awful, but you might learn one thing or two.
No. You know, Virtue is probably the best power scaler in the game right now. So go sub to Virtue. Make sure that you guys run that up. We're both trying to hit 10K by the end of the year. You guys can make that happen. So looking forward to that. But thank you guys so much. If you made it all the way to the end, I greatly appreciate it. And until next time, have an awesome day.